Hello everybody, welcome back to Life Stories. My name is Trent and I hope you're doing awesome as always. Today we got some stories coming at you from Reddit/idontworkherelady. Hopefully we got some good ones today, so buckle in, grab some snacks, because we're getting started now. Our first story is titled, Ex-Boss Called Me to Yell at Me for Not Showing Up to Work. I'm new to Reddit and I'm a bit tipsy, so be easy on me. I thought this story would be a good fit here. Some backstory and general info. I'm a female with a somewhat unique name. Yes, this is important. I was 18, I'm 23 now, when I got my first job at a Western wear store, and didn't even work there for a full year. We sold mainly cowboy boots and some clothes and accessories that went along with that general theme. I loved working there, and it was a pretty great first job. There were two locations, one in my town and one in the next state. I stayed at one location in my town, and my boss mostly stayed at the other location, because she lived closer to it. She also had an employee who would go in between stores as the boss needed it. At first, I thought my boss was a really badass woman. However, that opinion would soon change. You see, she sucked at running a business, and didn't want to keep paying the expensive rent for the building we were currently using. So, she moved the store to an obscure location at the beginning of the summer. She admitted that summers were the slowest season. So in my opinion, it was not smart to move locations then. She would also avoid regular customers when they would come in to talk to her about their orders taking too long to arrive. I also heard she was a home wrecker, and the guy whose marriage she ruined would come into the store regularly. Needless to say, she was a bad businesswoman who did whatever she wanted. After she moved the store, we started losing business. She started scheduling less of us, having maybe 2 employees working at once. Then she told me, "It wouldn't hurt my feelings if you looked for another job." I remember that word for word. Looking back, I realized that was her way of saying, you should probably find another job. Soon, we weren't getting scheduled at all. She was running the store by herself and kept saying, "Maybe business will pick up next week and I'll need you." Then, one day, my mom came home and asked if my boss had moved again. I said I didn't know, then asked why. She informed me that she drove by my work and it looked empty. I told my friend, and soon she drove by and she told me that it was indeed completely deserted. I officially didn't have a job anymore. Thankfully, I was working at a barn a few days a week, so I had some kind of income. I did find out that this woman still had her other store open, so I was a little salty. Now, the real story. I was chilling at home, a few months after I found out my boss had deserted us, when I see that she's calling me. I thought it was weird and answered. The call started off very friendly and cheerful, but then her annoying side came out. The call went something like this. "Hello? Hi, OP? Yes? Hi, this is ex-boss. How are you? I'm alright. How are you? I'm good. Look, I'm calling because you can't keep calling out of work like this." Me, now completely confused. "Excuse me, what? You keep calling out when you should be here working. I have places I need to be, and ex-coworker can't run the store alone." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, you don't know what I'm talking about." She said it in a mocking tone. "No, ma'am, I haven't worked for you in months." She goes silent for a few seconds, then hangs up. I sat there for a minute, processing what just happened. I figured she must have a worker at the other store with the same name as me, and she just called the wrong one. But I have a very uncommon name, so that is unlikely in my opinion. And if it was a mistake, why not just show up to it? Suck it up and freaking apologize. But instead, like a scared middle schooler, she hangs up. It was in this moment I lost what little respect I had left for her. I wish there was a better ending, but there isn't. I never heard from her again. I've looked her up and her other store, and it turns out she eventually closed that store too. And now she works at an airport. That somewhat makes me happy. Part of me wants to open a store like hers and run it better than she did. We'll see. Hey OP, I mean, if there's anything to gain from this, you got some aspirations for the future, I think you could open up a pretty dang good business, at least by the way you described how much you loved working for them. And moving on along, our next story is titled, I Should Have Seen This Coming. Good morning. I know this incident comes from an odd perspective for this subject matter, but whenever I think of it, it makes me laugh out loud. This must have been about 25 years ago. It was a truly hot day in West London. The sun was shining, and I lived in Shepherd's Bush, which was always heaving with people when the sun was out. My daughter must have been around 10 years old. I decided with my friend that we would go to Holland Park for a picnic and allow the kids to play and see the peacocks. Firstly, I had to pop into the post office on Shepherd's Bush Green and get a parcel delivered. Now, in those days, money was tight. Every penny I had was accounted for, so little extras that I would have liked to have, I had to forego to ensure rent was paid and my daughter's needs were met. One of those little extras I could not afford was contact lenses. Now, from a very young age, my mother had described me as blind as a bat. In no way politically correct, but her term of endearment for a child who was short-sighted and often bumping into things as a result. On the day of this incident, I would have normally been wearing very thick milk bottle prescription lenses in some cheap frames. However, I had recently bought myself a pair of hot pink sunglasses with mirror shades from a secondhand shop. A real bargain, or so I thought. I could not see anything when I put them on, but boy did I feel stunning. Every time I wore them, as far as I was concerned, the compliments flowed. And although I could see absolutely nothing, I felt beautiful and glamorous. Now, when I look back on old pictures, I looked like a cross between Bootsy Collins and Eric Estrada on the TV show Chips. On the day of the incident, I had these glasses on. I took a taxi with my daughter and picked up my friend with her daughter. I then asked the driver to stop at the post office for me. I went in. I posted the parcel quickly and came out of the post office, got back in the taxi and said, "Can you drop us off at Holland Park, please?" whilst putting my purse in my bag and taking out some chapstick. About 10 seconds of silence, and then I looked up and saw 2 children next to me that I did not recognize. I then saw a man in the front seat staring at me in absolute disbelief. When I say I apologized profusely, I mean it. I apologized so much he could not stop laughing. He explained he was waiting for his wife, who had gone into the post office when I had suddenly jumped into his car. When I got out of his car, I immediately saw my friend and our 2 children standing outside of our taxi, laughing hysterically. Even the taxi driver was wiping tears from his eyes. Long story short, prescription glasses are prescribed for a reason. One of which was to stop ridiculous incidents like this. I can only hope that at some point, the driver of that car finds this subreddit and posts of the incident from his perspective. I actually really like this one. This got a good chuckle out of me. More funny ones like this, please, right? Good. And moving on, our next story is titled, "I'm 12 and don't work at a beer distributorship." My dad worked at a beer distributorship, and part of his job was eating out at restaurants they sold beer. So on Friday nights, we went out as a family, and on Saturdays, my parents went out as a couple. This happened in the late 70s, so no cell phones. Mom and Dad had left for the evening when the phone rang. I answered, and it was the alarm company. The alarm's going off at beer company. Can you put your dad on the phone?" Mr. Last Name, my dad, is not available. Have you called Paul or Tony?" The alarm company responded. I called Tony, and no one answered. He and his wife didn't have kids, so no babysitter. And some brat refused to put Paul on the phone. His kids were younger, so I'm guessing teenage babysitter. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Last Name isn't available. You'll need to call Mr. Dad's equal in the warehouse, or Mr. President, or Mr. Owner." "Listen, kid, put your dad on the phone now, or he will be fired." Note that this didn't faze me, and I knew who was going to be fired, and it wasn't my dad. "Don't curse at me. Call the next person on the list." I hung up the phone and took it off the hook. I grabbed Dad's Rolodex and looked up his equal in the warehouse and called him. He wasn't home. I hung up and picked up the phone to call the president of the company and got alarm company guy. "Listen here, you little," and followed up with a stream of expletives. I respond, "Don't curse at me." I hung up and called Mr. President and explained the situation, including that my parents were going to a major client's restaurant for dinner and meeting the owner, and the fact that the guy kept cursing me out. Mr. President said, "Okay, I'll take care of it. Leave the phone off the hook for 30 minutes, then hang up and I'll call you back." 30 minutes passed. President calls. "I've taken care of the break-in and the alarm company guy. He won't be doing that again. Leave a note for your dad to call me before he goes golfing in the morning." The next day, my dad finds out that a couple of teens had used an extension ladder to climb up on the wall around the loading yard and jump down inside. One broke his leg, and the other was bruised. Their intention was to steal the kegs sitting in the yard. What they didn't know was that those were empty kegs being shipped back to the brewery. How they expected to get full kegs over a 10-foot wall without a ladder was never explained. Their parents tried the "I'm going to sue you for tempting my kids if you don't drop the charges" tactic. That didn't work, and the kids each got a shiny criminal record. I was only told that the situation at the alarm company was handled. I don't know what happened to the cursing guy, but he had threatened Paul's babysitter with having Paul fired also. She was in tears when they got home. I do know that on weekends, the call order was changed to president, owner, president's secretary, who would know what restaurants the salesperson were going to that night, dad's equivalent in the warehouse, Tony, and then Paul. And that's the end of that story, and for as inconclusive as the ending wound up being, we still got to sit here and ponder how somebody could possibly get beer kegs over a 10-foot wall. Some people just don't use their brains, I guess. And with that out of the way, we are out of time for today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you so much for tuning into Life Stories, and I hope you're all doing well during these times. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content coming your way so you don't get bored. My name is Trent, and I hope to see you guys soon.